Hi, this is Denise Matthew, and I'm back with part 4 and the final part of HD 101, A Beginner's Guide on How to Read Your Human Design Chart. In the first 3 parts, we've done a ton of stuff. So I'm assuming that you've already gone through the parts and you know what's happening. And we're going to continue on today, go to the planets. We'll talk a little bit about the lines and how they factor into what it means when you have a gate in a certain line. And then we're going to finish up with a chart example, and I'll just go through the chart using all the techniques that we've already learned just to show you how the technique all comes together. As always, feel free to leave as many comments or questions that you want, and I'll answer them either in the comment section or with a future video. I'll let you know in the comment section. And as I do with every video, I just want to say that if my speed of the way I speak is a little too fast, make sure that you use the feature on YouTube to reduce this playback speed so that the speed will reduce to your liking. So let's get into the information. In part 1, we talked about type and strategy and profile. In part 2, we talked about authority, and we did the centers head, ajna, and also the throat. In part 3, we finished the centers off, which were the identity, the root, the sacral, and also the will center, as well as the spleen and the solar plexus, or the emotional center. I also talked about the gates when I talked about every different center, and I also gave you a ton of information or written slides with all the keywords for both the channels and the gates. And now we're getting to the final leg of the journey, and that's all about the planets and how they factor in your human design body graph. Since human design is many different systems all in one, there are parts of astrology that feature in the body graph. Now, you don't need to know astrology to know anything about human design. It certainly doesn't hurt to know some astrology, but again, it's all within the human design system, and you absolutely don't need to know astrology. But the reason why I need to talk about the planets is that the planets are found in certain gates. And that's the important part, because each planet has its own specific flavor and what it gives to that particular gate. So there's an expression that comes through the gate that sort of connects to the gate. So you have your gate, which means a certain thing, and then you also have the line, which gives it another flavor, and then you have the planet, which is just one more dimension of the whole energy of that particular gate. So we know that the design side of the body graph is all related to where the planets were in the sky 88 degrees before the birth of the individual. So that usually works out to be about 88 days before. So for instance, if somebody was born April 20th, then their design date would be January 22nd. The design date really isn't important for you to know, but it's just to say that that's where the information comes from. So it's where the position of the planets were at that particular time. So for instance, if we were into astrology, if you're into astrology and you have what they call a birth chart or a natal chart, then you'll see that the only parts of the chart that will show up on a natal chart or a birth chart would be exactly what was going on with the planets when you were born. And that would be your personality. The other side would not be something that you're going to see. So they're almost like invisible spots that you don't necessarily see. And that sort of makes a lot of sense, because considering that the design side is really where we don't know as much about ourselves until we're older. So if we look at this particular chart, this person was born on January 5th. That means their design date was on October 10th. Again, not important, but I just wanted to show you that that's where the extra numbers come from, the extra gates, and also where the planets were on the design side. And the design side, of course, is important because it's just as much a part of us as a personality side. So if you look at the human design mandala, usually people don't have this as that would be their body graph that they'd look at, because it has a lot of extra information that can be a little bit confusing. But just so you know where the planets and how they sort of go around the whole mandala, I just wanted to bring this image up. But usually you'll just get the plain body graph, which is the center, and that's easier to follow. As you get more into human design, you might want to use a mandala. It's not necessary because everything's written on the chart anyhow. This is just like, it's just kind of, actually, let's be honest, it's kind of prettier. It does have the hexagrams on the outside. So say you're into I Ching, because that's the I Ching hexagrams on the outside, or say you're into astrology, you'll notice that the zodiac signs are around there. So if you notice, I have Aquarius pointed out. So the whole chart or the whole circle is 360 degrees, and each one of the gates is in a specific degree section or a certain amount of degrees. So for instance, if we look at the gate 64, we see that it's in Virgo between 11.22 degrees and 17 degrees of Virgo. So that's where the gate 64 would be found. Again, not important, but if you're somebody who likes astrology or you're interested in astrology, then this is kind of where you can sort of play with it. The other thing is you'll notice that the gate 64 is in the 64th hexagram. And so if you are into I Ching, then you would look at the 64th hexagram if you're interested. And some people will sort of cross match those, but this is kind of advanced stuff, and I would suggest that you get the basics down before you add into it. But if you really are an astrology buff and you really want to connect it with human design, then you might have a lot of fun with it. But when we're looking at the planets, we're thinking about the sun is generally where all the incarnation crosses come from, because if you notice that every incarnation cross is made up of the sun and the earth. So the sun goes around the whole mandala in a year, and the moon goes around in about 28, 29 days. The other planets have varying speeds. So if you look at, for instance, Mercury, that's about a year. Venus is about a year, except for when it goes retrograde, and then it might take a little bit longer. Then you have Mars, which is about 2 to 2.5 years. Then you get into Jupiter, which is 12 years. Then you get into Uranus, which is 82 years. Then you get into Neptune. Neptune is 165 years and Pluto is 248 years. So when I talk about transits, like sometimes I'll do a transit report. When I'm talking about transits, I like to focus on the bigger planets. They don't move as much, during a year, or maybe they don't even change gates in a year. But the whole point of it is that it's going to be impactful because that particular planet is in a gate for a very long time. Right now, as I'm recording this, we have, for instance, Pluto's been in the gate 61, and it's been in the gate 61 all year. Now, just getting back to this whole planetary thing, we're going to distill it down. The most important thing, or the only thing that you really need to know, is in your body graph and the gates. I have some key words about the planets, and I'll have those later on as we go along. And so you can just kind of mix the flavor of the gate with the flavor of the planet to give you more of a feeling of exactly how that planet energy is going to factor in your body graph. So let's go in and have a look at what the glyphs are and what the glyphs represent. And one last thing I forgot to say was also Saturn goes around the mandala, and that is in about 28 to 29 years. When we talk about glyphs, we're talking about the symbols that are for the planets. So on the right-hand side here, we have the glyphs for all the planets that are in the body graph. And the glyphs are for the sun, earth, moon, and it goes down. So the next slide, I'll have all the names for all the different glyphs. And that will show you exactly what gate was being transited by what planet at the moment of your birth. And then the design side, as I spoke before about, that's 88 days or 88 degrees before your birth. And here's just a different image of the planets and the glyphs. Basically just a different mode of seeing the planets and the glyphs. So here's an image that tells you all the names for all the particular glyphs, and it goes right from the sun down to Pluto. Now, the only glyph that we don't have here is Chiron. And Chiron is important, especially for anybody who has a 6th line in their profile. I will talk about that a little bit later on, but for now, I just wanted to show you these particular glyphs so that you can identify what gate is in what planet. And this is a key for all the degrees for all the different gates that I talked about and what particular zodiac sign they're in, so that if you want to look at exactly where they are, if you're into astrology, again, this is not it's something you need to know, but if you want to know it, it's available for you. And I actually just took it in 2 different slides so that it would be easy to see, because when I increased the size of it in just one side, you couldn't see it enough. So it's the same thing on 2 different slides, so you can get a nice view of all of them rather than it being too small and difficult to read. And as you can see, this comes from humandesignsystem.com. And if you want to check out their website, feel free to do so. So here's a complete list with all the keywords for you if you want to do a screenshot so that you have this for your reference about all the planets and the flavors that they give to the gates. I will go through them individually, but if you want this for your records, I thought I'd just leave it here so you can do with it as you like. As I was saying before, when we talk about the planets, we're talking about a different type of flavor. So when a gate is in the sun, that would be the outer expression of who you are. And when we talk about it being in the sun, that's going to be in the top 4 numbers up top. So that's part of your incarnation cross. There's already so much on all the other parts of human design. To talk about the incarnation cross would just complicate things even more. So in the future, I will make a video about how to read your incarnation cross, and knowing the basics that we've learned in this course will be very helpful for you to read your incarnation cross. So the bottom line about the sun is that it's important. And that's for the design side as well as the personality side. It is the expression of who you are. And it really is when we talk about the sun sign in astrology, this is the sun sign, you could say, or the sun gate for you in human design. So it's an expression of what you show to the world when you walk out in the world, because the sun is the embodiment of who we are. And the whole concept is that we know more about our conscious sun than we know about our design sun or our unconscious sun. Meaning that when you're out in the world, then people see that particular part of you. They may see the other part of you, but that's a part of you that you're not actually consciously putting out into the world. It's just part of you that's walking in the world and just being that expression of the sun. So that's the difference. And just for your reference, this is where the incarnation cross is on this particular chart. Sometimes they have it at the bottom of the charts. If you notice in the incarnation cross, they have the gate 54, the gate 53, the gate 57, and also the gate 51. And if you notice, that lines up with the personality sun, the personality earth, and the design sun and the design earth. So that's the top 4 numbers that will always make up your incarnation cross. So to read your incarnation cross, like I said, I will do a video in the future, but to read it for now, if you wanted to kind of get a flavor of what it kind of meant for you, to know the gates that make up your incarnation cross, to really get in touch with those gates, to try and identify them in yourself and try and identify them in other people, will give you even more of a flavor of what it means to have that particular incarnation cross. But based on what Ra Uru said, your incarnation cross is not something that you live out immediately. It's something that usually comes after you've been in human design for a while. It's the high side. And it also, a lot of times from what I've read, is that it comes after you've done the 7-year deconditioning, which is the first day you met human design, or you saw your first body graph or had your first reading, is a day that you met human design, and that is considered the day where you start your deconditioning with human design. And usually that only happens if you stick with it. I mean, it's not going to happen if you're not doing human design. It's a 7-year process, and what it means is that it goes through all the particular gates, and based on human design theory, each gate is about 40 days at a time. And what happens in that particular time for each particular gate is that you are living out that particular energy of that gate. And even if you don't have it defined in your body graph, I mean, you have the whole mandala you're going to go through, and it starts at a certain way. Richard Rudd has a whole writing about it where he talks about 7 years on the wheel of passage. It might be available. I'm sure it's available somewhere on the internet, so you can check that out if you're interested in it. Richard Rudd, if you don't know who he is, he actually was a colleague and student of Ra Uru. He worked with human design for quite a while, and then later on, he went off and did his own thing and developed what he called the gene keys. So that's who he is. Now, if we move on to the earth is all about what grounds you in your life. So it's what we receive from the world. I'm just talking about the planets right now and what they mean. At the end, I'm going to go through a chart and talk about the different gates and all those kind of things when I do the whole example. So you'll be able to see how you put it all together. In the beginning, it's mainly just keywords, and I've added the keywords, and the gates to this video, so that if you didn't watch the other videos where I had them in, you could get a idea of the flavors of the planets combined with the gates, and that's kind of how you read it. The more you work with a body graph, your body graph or other people's body graphs, because this particular course is for somebody who just wants to look at their own body graph. I mean, it's a tool to have self-learning and to get into your chart so you can see exactly who you are based on your chart. Or you can also use it to read yourself and other people. There's so many ways that you can use this information. But the earth is important in that it grounds us in who we are and what we're doing in our lives. So I'll as I said, I'll show you in a gate what it looks like soon, so hang on for that. When we talk about the moon, this is all about the emotions, our emotions, and it is also what drives you. It's what puts the fire in the engine, what makes you get up in the morning, that propelling force that is always making you sort of go the extra mile. And usually the moon tells us the driving force for it. It kind of connects with the incarnation cross. So it kind of talks about the theme, where you're going to do your incarnation cross, how you're going to express it, because the moon is such a big part of you. The North Node is the theme that gets activated after our Uranus opposition. And everybody's is going to be a little bit different, but it's usually about 38, 42 years of age, around there. And it's the theme of your life that you live out after your Uranus opposition. And this is not as important for people who are sixth line, because Chiron is sort of the stage where they change. The nodes are always going to be part of your life. They don't go away. And just because it's a theme for the second part of your life doesn't mean that the South Node, which is considered the theme before your Uranus opposition, goes away. They do still work. They're always going to be there, but then that theme sort of gets more activated. My perspective on the nodes is that they're karmic as well. And so the North Node, if we throw in some astrology, is where we're going in this incarnation, where we want to, the sort of destination of the things we want to learn, the places we want to go can be seen with the North Node. And as I said, the South Node is the theme that we live out before the Uranus opposition. And once again, in my opinion, there's a lot of karma involved with the nodes. So the South Node for me is what we came into this life with. Now, you can believe in past life incarnations or not, but it's the gifts we come in with that we already know. So usually the energy of the South Node is something that we find easy to do. We may not necessarily want to do it, but we find it easy to do it, or we may want to do it because it is so easy for us. But our destination is meant to go to the North Node, and because of that, it can be difficult because the North Node is so foreign and so unusual to us. Again, the same concept is here. The Chiron return is important for those who are sixth line, and the Chiron return happens about age 50 or 51. We'll talk about Chiron a little bit later. Some of these planets, like for instance Mercury, Mercury is a planet of communication. It's the planet that moves fast. It is the planet of that does all the communications that we have. It can be the media, it could be anything that's sort of communicating. And as expected in human design, it's what we communicate, what we talk about in the world, and that's what that gate, in whatever gate is in Mercury, or whatever gate Mercury was transiting when we were born, or our design side, is what we communicate or talk about in our world. And Venus is what we value, because Venus is all about beautiful things, things that we love, the things that make our hearts sing. It's all about the nice food, good food, things like that. So it is all about feminine energy as well when we're talking about human design. And it could be who we are attracted to in a partnership. So the kind of feminine energy that we're attracted to in a partnership. Now, the feminine energy doesn't have to be gender-based. It could be the feminine energy, that soft energy, that the yin to the yang. And if Venus is the yin, then Mars is the yang. This is also where we grow. So the gate this is that Mars is in is a gate that we grow as we get older. And usually after we have our Uranus opposition, we sort of mature more on that gate. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about the expression of the gate maybe on the lower side or the shadow side, and then it becomes more on the high side as we age. It's also the masculine energy that we are attracted to as well. When we talk about Saturn, we're talking about a place where we learn our biggest and deepest lessons, because this energy, the gates that are in our Saturn, both the personality and the design, are the areas where we can a lot of times have our biggest lessons in life. It's where you throw everything in the fire, and what comes out is the gold. And that's what Saturn is all about. Saturn is a teacher. Saturn is a taskmaster. Saturn will push you to the wall and say, what do you really want? How far are you willing to go for the goals and dreams that you have? And how hard are you willing to work? Because it is all about work. So when you master your Saturn, or you master the energy of those gates, then you get your Jupiter reward. And Jupiter is all about our reward. As I said, it's the blessings that you get. It's the good things you get in life because you've done hard work. So if you go out and you work a job and you bring home a certain amount of money and you get to go on a vacation, that's Jupiter. The vacation is Jupiter. You're out having fun, you're enjoying life, and that's the reward you get. So Saturn is your job. And Jupiter, in an analogy, Saturn would be like the job you do and all the things you have to do to make the money so that you can have that vacation at the end of the rainbow. Or you could also have something, if you don't like vacations, it could be something that you buy. If some people like new cars or something material. Usually Jupiter is about that, eat, drink, and be merry and have a great time. And those are the rewards that you get in your design and your personality when you've done the hard work of Saturn. It's like the cool drink or the cold drink you get at the end of a long, enduring race. And the last three planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are considered generational planets. And the reason why they are is because they don't move a lot. I did talk about earlier that one planet, like for instance, Pluto in 2020 is in the gate 61 for the full year. So it means that it moves extremely slowly, and it has a really long revolution around the mandala. So because of that, these are what they consider generational. So somebody who's born in a certain year could have the same gates in Uranus as other people, because maybe there was only a few gates that Uranus would travel. So that's what they mean by generational. But frankly, I'm going to say that as far as I'm concerned, a lot of these bigger planets like Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, they still have a decent effect in your chart. And I know that everybody is different. So based on your chart, I wouldn't just discount these gates as not as important, because they are generational, because they do have interaction with other planets. And I look at that from an astrological perspective, and you don't need to look at it in that perspective, but you may feel these energies of the gates of these three planets strong or not as strong. But again, it's all individual. And it's definitely worthwhile checking them out to see how they factor in your life. In Uranus, it's all about where we're a little unusual. And all of us are unusual, or we have unique interests in certain things. That's just part of who we are. We're all individuals, and we all have, and some of us are a little more, if you want to use the word freaky, than others. But, we're all freaky in some little way. And that's what we're like in Uranus. This is where things come out of the blue, or the energy of these gates can surprise us or sort of take us off our stride and show us something that we never expected. Uranus is the type of energy that we're walking down the street and suddenly the sidewalk disappears, and that's Uranus. As I said before, Neptune is generational as well, and this is where there's a mystical part of us where things may be a little bit not as clear to us. When we talk about Neptune, we talk about dissolving, and it's ruled by Pisces, which is all about this watery kind of psychic energy. So this is where we could have our spiritual theme, or we could be intuitive here, or it could be things that are not as clear. So maybe the energy of this particular gate isn't as clear as it is in other places. And Pluto is considered the planet of transformation, but in order to transform, it takes everything down to the foundation. So it's like the storm that comes out and blows your house away, and you have to rebuild a house, but the house that you build is stronger than the house that you had before. And that's kind of what Pluto does. So the lessons here are not what you call soft and fluffy like they would be with Venus. They're more of something where, you're really learning something in a big way. Again, this is generational, so it can affect you more or less based on your individual body graph and how it is connected with the other planets in your body graph as well. So this is where we're meant to grow and transform and become, as I say, you build something better on the foundation after everything is sort of blown away. And this is Chiron, and that's the glyph. Chiron's it's not a planet, it's a comet. And the orbit is kind of interesting. It goes around the whole mandala in about 50 to 51 years. This is a big planet for anybody with a sixth line because this is all about that Chiron return. When Chiron gets back to where it was when somebody was born, then you get your Chiron return, and this would be the time where you, as a role model, after it would be your third stage of your transformation, because the first stage is 0 to about 28, 29, and that's sort of 0 until your Saturn return, and then from your Saturn return till your Chiron return, you're on the roof, or you're integrating all the things you did in your first 28 to 29 years when you did a lot of experimentation. And then it moves on to, as I said, the Chiron return, where you come off the roof and all the things you've integrated, you just live your best life, or who you are, to in authenticity. And because of your authenticity and being exactly who you are, you inspire those around you to be exactly who they are. In human design, everyone has Chiron, and it does have a bearing on everybody, even people who don't have a sixth line in their profile. Chiron is going to be a theme in pretty much everybody's life. It is a big turning point or a turning time for a lot of people when they have their Chiron return. So I don't think we can just discount it and say that it's not going to matter to somebody who isn't a sixth line. But for somebody with a sixth line energy, this is the coming out phase. This is like where you literally get your chance to come out after all the time. The butterfly comes out of its cocoon, and it's able to fly and be the expression of its true self. And because of this whole long trip between birth and the Chiron return, anybody with the sixth line energy is going to be considered somebody who's a late bloomer. That doesn't mean that you don't have accomplishments as you go along, because everybody is designed differently, and it's all related to what else is in the body graph. You can't base a whole body graph on one particular gate or one particular profile. There has to be everything sort of melded together. Chiron is the wound that we can't heal. But because it's a wound that we can't heal, by helping other people with that particular wound who have a wound like yours, you in some way make your wound not go away, but it gets a little bit less painful for you. And that's the whole point of Chiron, is that you're healing others, and in healing others, you're sort of assisting yourself to get through it, to move through it. So that's why they call it the wounded healer. It is a very deep wound for us. And a centaur who in Greek mythology who couldn't heal himself. So that's the whole point of that's why we talk about this wound that you can't heal. Now in human design, it's where life gives us a lot of spiritual challenges, and it really depends upon the gate where Chiron is in your chart. Now that's not easy to find because it's not in all the body graphs, but a lot of paid body graph software or subscriptions have Chiron in it so that you can see it. But if you wanted to use that key that I gave you for the astrological degrees and the zodiac signs, you usually can find it from like a natal astrology chart. You can find out where your Chiron is. And if you really have trouble with it, just email me your details and I can do it for you. And in human design, the whole concept with this Chiron is you want to bring the lessons out to the world. The whole idea, as I said, about healing others with the energy of the lessons that you've learned about this wound, makes your wound get better and better. And just so we have it for your reference, in case you didn't get it from another video that I had them in part 3. Just again here, so that you can match the flavors of the planet with the actual gate, so that you can sort of put the keyword of the gate with the flavor of the planet and come up with a bit of an explanation. And it's over 3 different pages, so you'll see the next three pages. And again, you can do a screenshot or whatever you want to do. So we've come to the part where we've done pretty much everything, but I'm going to add one more thing, and it's a bonus that I'm adding just to give you even more of a dimension on each different gate. And because we didn't talk about the lines that each gate is in. And so you have the planet that they're in. You also have the gate, and then you're going to have the line they're in. So let's talk about that. And then after we do that, we'll do a sample chart and put everything together. If you look at a human design book that's written by Ra Uru, every single gate has a line in. So there's an interpretation of every single gate and every single line. So not everybody has that book, and you may not even like the interpretation. But there's sort of a general theme on each line, and it kind of is close to the profile, but also a little bit different. So let's go through the lines. So the first line, as it is in a profile, is all about investigating the data. So if we have a gate that's in the first line, this gate is about, it's a new energy. So you're learning about this gate, you're investigating this gate, you're investigating the energy of this gate. It's the first part of a journey to the 6th line. So it is about data collection, it is about finding out what this whole gate is about, and that kind of thing. When we get to the 2nd line, we've already investigated the energy of that particular gate. Now we're going to come together with what we've learned, and we're going to go away and figure out what exactly this energy means, how it works for us, what are the high energy parts of it, what are the low sides of the particular gate. So we're really getting into this whole energy of that 2nd line. But we all also have to remember that the 2nd line represents talent. So a gate in a 2nd line can mean a place where you have a natural talent. So that's something to think about as well. And just like the 3rd line in a profile, once you have the information, you've investigated it, you've come together with the information, you've sort of looked at what exactly is there, you've had some time to really get with that information. Now you want to go out into the world and you want to experiment. So when we talk about the 3rd line of a gate, we're experimenting with the energy of the gate. What's the high side of this gate? And if I have the high side of this gate, if I express the high side of this gate, what do I get in return? How does it show up in the world? If I express the low side, how does it show up in the world? So that's the kind of energy that you're out there finding out the information even more on an experimental basis. And now you're outside of that, sort of just on your own with the energy, with the information. And now you're getting out there and really figuring out what exactly this gate is all about. Now you've found out the information about the gate. You've come together with the energy of the gate. You've figured out how it works out in the world because you've been experimenting with it. Now you sort of have some data, some information, and it's not just data that you learn from a book, it's data that you learn from experience. And now you're saying, okay, I know how this energy works. Let me build a foundation with this energy. So now you're building a foundation and you're making this gate part of who you are. And maybe you have more of a fixed expression with this gate, because now we've got into a fourth line, which was more of a fixed energy or a fixed way of expressing energy. At this point, you've collected the data, you've come together with the data, you've sort of made sense of the data, you went out into the world, you experimented, you found some information based on your experiences, and you've built a foundation, sort of a fixed energy, a fixed idea of exactly how this energy looks, how the energy of this gate looks. And now you're going out into the world and you're sharing what you learned, because that would be the fifth line. And we always say that anything in the fifth line is sort of the highest expression of the energy of that gate, because at that point you've done all the work ahead of time and now you're out there sharing, or you're teaching or universalizing the energy, breaking up concepts so that more people can understand the concepts that you've actually learned with all the things that you've done to get up to this stage. So if the fifth line is the highest expression of any gate, because you've done the research, you've done the collecting of data, you've investigated it, you've come together with the information, you've experienced it and experimented with it and got some hard data about how it works. You've built a foundation of what you believe is true to be true about the energy of this gate. You've come to the point where you're actually feeling pretty good about going out into the world and sharing the concepts and ideas and universalizing the energy of this gate. There's really not much more to do. So the sixth line is just like any other sixth line. It comes in 3 stages. So the first stage is the first stage of any sixth line, and that's going to be the 0 to 28 to 30, and that's going, or 28 to 29, up until your Saturn return, the experimental part. So we're going back to that third line energy. Then after that, we have this integration stage where we're taking all the information and figuring out what worked, what didn't work. We're absorbing all the energy, the information, and that's where you would be before you went on to the fourth line if we were doing this per the lines. Then we get to the sixth line part of it. It is just like any other expression, and that is the role model. And that would be after the Chiron return, or the 50 to 51 years of age. This is where you have learned all the information, you figured it all out, and now you just walk out into the world and you're an expression of that energy of that gate. But you are an expression of the energy of that gate in a way that you don't even really realize that you're an expression of that energy. You're basically just out there living yourself, being who you are, and that is just part of who you are, this gate. So it becomes almost like you have an arm, and you know you have an arm, but you're not always aware of the arm. Your arm does things. You grab something with you move your arm so you can grab something, or you lift it up to do whatever you want to do, but you're not consciously saying, I have an arm, it's part of my body, and that type of thing, unless you're actually actively trying to do that. That's what it's all about when it comes to becoming the sixth line of any energy. That energy can be where you're just so, it's just such a part of who you are that you've almost forgotten that it's even a part of you, because it's so melded with who you are that you can't literally pull it out and go, oh, well, this is who I am and this is what I like to do. You can do that more with the other lines, because you can probably be more aware of it. But when you get to the sixth line, it just becomes so much a part of you that there is a difficult time knowing where you begin, where it begins, and where you end, kind of thing. And so say you had the gate 57 in the line 6, you could say that in the line 6, the gate 57, which is all about prophecy, knowing the future, psychic energy, possibly the fear of the future, but it could also be this concept that you could be quite intuitive, highly intuitive, but you don't think you're intuitive. You just have these kind of intuitions, and as far as you're concerned, that everybody has that. It's just the way it is. And so you could just say things that are intuitive, and people would say, wow, you're psychic, and you go, no, I'm not even a little bit. And so it's just this part of you that you don't even know it's part of you, but it is a part of you, and other people can see it as a part of you. And it is an inspiration to others just by the concept that if you're living the best part of this gate, then you're being an inspiration just by being exactly who you are. And the other thing that we just want to, I think I've mentioned this before, but I just want to say it one more time because it's important, is that if you have a gate in your body graph featured more than once, you're going to look at the line that would be the lowest, or the like, for instance, if you have it in the gate, like gate 25, and you have it in the line 2 and the lines 4 and the line 6, you would say in the beginning you come together with the energy of the gate 25, and then you go and build a foundation, and then eventually you come out as a role model on that energy. So there's going to be a much bigger theme in your life based on the fact that you have the gate in several different lines, or you have it a few times in your body graph. Sometimes it's not always going to be different lines, but you would go from the lowest line to see how it might express in yourself, and then slowly work up to, that's where you're going to go in the end. And you'll express it in the 6th line based on if it is in the 6th line. So it's something to keep in mind, that a gate in your chart that's featured a couple times will always be a bigger theme in your life. Now, we've done all the information, and now all we have to do is just go through a body graph. So let's give it a run with all the things we've learned. This is the same body graph that I've used for example, just so that you know where things are in the chart. So we're going to go through the same body graph that I've had for the whole chart. This is the body graph of Yogananda, and he was an Indian guru who came to North America, and he sort of spread meditation and yoga throughout the North America. He was all about being mindful, and he was from India and had this calling to come to North America to spread the word. And he had a lot of mystical things happen to him. He could go into extremely deep trances. Many people have been influenced or inspired by his teachings, but also he had written one book called An Autobiography of a Yogi, and a lot of people, and I think Steve Jobs, for instance, was somebody who, when he passed, he had given the instructions that at his funeral he wanted everybody to have a copy of that particular book. So a lot of people, I think even the Beatles, had some interaction with his teachings, if not him in person. But he had a big presence when he lived, and I mean, he's been dead for quite a few years. He was born back in 1893 in India. So let's go through his chart and see if it lines up with the life he lived. So let's go through first his type, find out what his type is, what his strategy is, and we'll check out his profile and talk a little bit about that as well. If we look at his chart, we see that he's a manifestor type, and we know he's a manifestor type, first of all, because of course it's written, but the other way we know he's a manifestor type is that he has a motor to his throat. So if we look at, for him, it's not what you call a direct connection to the throat. So in other words, there's only one channel and it takes it right to the throat. His goes through, his will center is a motor, and it goes through his spleen, and then it goes up through the 48-16 channel and goes to his throat. So that's how we know he's a manifestor. The other requisite for being a manifestor is that he is an open sacral. So we know that he has an open sacral, and he also has a motor to the throat. And that, in fact, will tell us that he's a manifestor. Now that we know he's a manifestor, we also know that the manifestor, their whole strategy is all about informing. Manifestors are here to manifest or to go out and initiate whatever they want to initiate. The only boss, or, and I say boss in quotations, would be something bigger than them, and that would be like the universe. Now, if he had an emotional wave, if he was emotionally defined, and I know I'm jumping ahead and talking about his authority, but he doesn't have emotional authority. That's the first thing that we'd also want to know, because that sort of will affect how he makes his decisions as a manifestor. That would mean he would need to go through his emotional wave before he made his decisions to initiate. But since he's open emotionally, emotionally. We know for sure that he doesn't have an emotional wave, and so he can make his decisions in a different way. He's splenic authority. It's written on the chart as well. We'll talk about the splenic authority in just a minute, but let's talk about the fact that his strategy is to figure out what he wants to do in his life, what he wants to initiate. And once he decides where he wants to go, what he wants to initiate, it's all about informing the people that are important to him of his intention or what he wants to do. So, for instance, if he wanted to move to North America, and he had a guru that he used to work with, he would inform his guru, I'm going to move to North America. He's not asking the guru if he could move to North America. He's telling the guru, I am moving to North America, because the guru is someone who's important to him in his life, and he's part of his whole teaching. And then, he needs to be told. So then he would inform the guru. Yogananda was a profile 1-3. So we go back to the first line is all about data collection, and the third line is all about experimenting. We do know that this is a right angle profile because a 1-3 is a right angle profile. It's not a left angle profile. So we're talking about somebody who wasn't out giving karma to people. He was here on a personal journey to find his way and find how things worked with him. There is this investigation, a lot of investigation and investigating and then experimenting. So there's this whole concept of going to a different country, investigating that country, experimenting with his teachings, experimenting with what he had to bring to that particular country, what kind of teachings he had to bring, his yoga teachings to that particular country. Okay, now we're going to go into his open centers, but before we do, we're going to go into his splenic authority. Now, we know the splenic authority is something that comes from the spleen, which means it's an intuitive energy or it's an awareness center. The energy of the spleen, or the messages that the spleen give, are the messages in the now. So it's his intuition would have been, or his authority would have been, a really quick kind of pulse that would say, okay, this is what you need to know. This is the answer you need to have. Also, because he has an open emotional center, we know that his authority is going to be something where if you feel good in that moment, if you get an internal hit that, yes, this is correct for you in the moment, then you act on that decision. So in other words, if he felt good on something he wanted to initiate in the moment, then that would be a green light for him to go ahead with it. So he would need to be in connection with his intuition. He has a lot of gates on his spleen, so he would have a lot of different ways of getting intuitive hits to help him, maneuver and manage his decisions in what he wanted to initiate. So that's something important to know. We will talk about the gates when we get into the gates part. But for now, we know that he's a splenic authority. He has a lot of intuition, but the splenic authority is all about a quick hit and moving on, and it doesn't come back again to give you another hit. It's in the moment, and again, the open emotion is all about an in the moment decision. If it feels good, you make the decision and you go ahead, and for him it would be to initiate. He also has an open heads, and we know that that's a pressure center. He also has an open root, which is another pressure center. So he has both pressure centers wide open. The open head is open to inspiration, but always being inspired. So he would have had potential for a lot of inspiration, to be inspired by a lot of different things. And based on his story, it seems like he was inspired a lot. And because of his profile, he would have wanted to find out the data on things, the information about things. And, after he did, he would go out and experiment. So he would be inspired, potentially, go out and experiment with what he had discovered. So I would expect there would be a lot of experimentation, which he actually did. He had a lot of experimentation. He had a lot of people that he sort of met up with and would talk to and figure out what they had, what kind of information he could get from them, and then he would move on. And some people he would stick around with, and other people he would just move on. It was a lot of data collection, which would make a lot of sense because the open head is all about this inspiration, trying to figure out these inspirations, trying to move through these inspirations to understand what is what and what he could get or learn from it. He also has an open ajna, which would have meant that his beliefs were very fluid. Based on his story, he didn't come in with this whole concept of, I believe he was brought up as a Hindu, but he was very open to other faiths. In fact, he had pictures of Jesus and other spiritual leaders, or you would say divinities of different religions. So he was open to different religions, which is something that is very common with somebody with an open ajna. They're not fixed in their belief. There is a fluidity that they can move and understand different concepts. Yes, they will be imprinted basically with things that had been part of his life, but again, there would be this ability to look at other people's perceptions, look at other people's concepts, look at other people's ideations, and say, yes, I can actually see that point of view as well. So this is something that you don't oftentimes see in spiritual leaders, because they're from what I have seen and the research that I've done, a lot of people who are spiritual leaders come in with a fixed ajna because they have a firm belief and a fixed belief in the particular spiritual nation that they're actually connected to. He also has an open identity, and he only has one gate on his open identity, which is quite unusual. So he had an extreme fluidity of his identity. What that means is that this whole concept of when he met somebody, he could connect with their souls. He could figure out who they were based on their souls. So it was like a real connection with the souls, and it was based on this one particular gate, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But it's only one gate is going to be quite impactful on his whole identity and that whole concept of who he was, and sort of this whole ability to commune with many different people. It wasn't just one type of person that he would commune with, because anybody with an open identity connects with the soul of a person, and because they connect with the soul, they don't look at what somebody looks like or how they're dressed or anything. They only see the person, say, their truest expression or the truest part of who they are inside their soul. And with an open identity, you could have this whole lovability concept where you may not feel like you were loved, but again, this is all based on the imprinting that he got as a child. And as a child, he was loved considerably. He was loved by his parents. He had a deep connection with his mother, who she died when he was fairly young, but he had a deep connection with his mother. In fact, he felt very loved by his mother. So that would have been an imprint that came early on in his life, and that would have been an influence that would have not, because he didn't have a fixed identity, but it certainly would have imprinted him with this concept of being loved and feeling loved. He also had an open sacral, which we know makes him a manifester. Again, he could run on other people's energy and be really in sort of have a lot of energy when he was around big groups of people, and then away from the groups of people, he would probably be very exhausted. He didn't live to be very old, and he died of a massive heart attack where he just sort of dropped after he had given a speech. So it means that he could have pushed himself beyond his capabilities. I'm sure that meditation helped a lot, but sometimes so much need and want for spiritual leaders that they sometimes, and especially with the will center being defined, I know I'm jumping ahead, but because it is defined, we should connect that the concept of going beyond your humanly capability, because you can will yourself. And when you have an open sacral, that can be a whole problem with burnout. Although he always seemed to be okay. Once again, we could go back to the whole meditation concept of being able to keep himself fairly healthy, because as far as I heard from, based on his biography, was that he basically had good health for the most part. He also had an open root, which means the whole concept of always needing to finish things, needing to get things done and move on to the next thing. So there could be a pressure to continue to move forward, to continue to do things. That was probably something he did a lot of, because he had a lot of work to do, and he had financial feelings that he had to take care of the finances of all these. He had these yoga centers or something like that, and just trying to finance all those centers, there was always this constant need to keep moving, to keep getting things done. So the open route certainly would have helped with that part of it. And if there's anything that we can say about his chart, we can say that there's a lot of openness. There's only 3 centers out of 9 that are defined. So this was a person who had a tremendous amount of openness. And so that means this ability to have a less fixed way of being, Although he did have specific things that he taught, like he did teach yoga, he did teach meditation and certain things like that. But there was this ability to change based on who he was with, his audience. If we look at his throat, we know that he has a motorized and defined throat because he's a manifester. A motorized throat is somebody who can be heard easily. They can initiate conversations. So because of that, he never would have needed to wait to be acknowledged before he spoke. He could just say what he wanted to say, and he wouldn't need any kind of initiation into conversation. So that was his ability to be able to speak whenever he wanted to speak, to initiate conversations, and to be heard in the way he wanted to be heard. He also has had the defined spleen, and I talked about he has a lot of gates on the spleen. We'll talk about those in a minute, but a defined spleen is somebody who has a good sense of time and a more fixed way of how his intuition expressed and how he learned about his health. And he also had a defined will. Now, a defined will would make people think that he was the type of person that could get the job done, somebody who knew what they were doing, because anybody with a defined will has this way of just the energy of the defined will has people believing that this person get the job done. A defined will can empower people. A defined will is about the resources that we bring in as well. So making money and those types of things would have probably been important to him, which they were, but it wasn't like a materialistic perspective. It was a tribal perspective, in that he needed to bring finances into his centers so that he could continue to run these centers. And that was part of what he had to do. So because he had a defined will, that meant that, making money might have been a little bit easier for him too, as in making money for his centers, not for himself, but I mean, he could have used it for himself, but as far as what I read, he used it for all his centers, and he lived a very sparse life. Because he had a defined will, there could have been potential for people to want to be competitive with him. There was potential for that. I do know that he did have a friend who was a very good friend of his, who they sort of went through pretty much everything together. And this friend was in training like him, and he helped him with a lot of these centers. But at one point, his friend sort of turned against him and wanted money from him, and became, I guess, in a way, sort of competitive with him. So this is the kind of energy, although he may not have been competitive at all, that he could have had directed at him just based on his will center. And also to remember is that the will center is work to rest. So it was important, and it is important for anybody with a defined will, to do a certain amount of work or whatever they want to do or need to do, and then to have rest times where they are recuperating from all the work they've done. And I think that he probably managed this in a way with his meditations. That would be sort of his way of reviving himself and recuperating and getting the rest he needed. So the meditation was a really important part of his life, and it became where he became more and more deeply involved in the meditation. He always had been involved, but his meditations went deeper and deeper, where he'd almost go into a trance-like state that he was, his pulse would go down and he would just be completely lost in the meditation. So let's go on to the gates and talk about the gates and also the channels as well as the planets. So if we start with his sun, we see that his conscious sun was in the gate 54, and his unconscious sun was in the gate 57. He had the right angle cross of penetration, and that's kind of like a penetrating intuition and almost like a shocking intuition, and how much intuition people with this energy have. And it is all about starting things. And I'm just talking about the incarnation cross just because it's in relation to his particular destiny, or how he lived his expression of life. So if we look at his personality sun, we see it's in the gate 54. The gate 54 is all about ambition and moving forward in life. It's a tribal energy, so it is about this energy of doing what you do for the tribe or for the people that matter to you. he did have a lot of tribal energy because he had a deep connection with his family. But this ambition was to was basically in his son, which was what he shone out to the world. This ambition, if we look below it, was to what was the ambition connected to? Well, it was connected to the Gate 53, which is all about new beginnings, starting things. And it makes a lot of sense because that's what he did. He went around and he started yoga center or meditation centers, or I don't know if they were called ashrams, but they might have been. I think they are called ashrams. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he went around in North America, which is a country that was completely unfamiliar to him. In fact, his intention or what he wanted to do in his life was to go and be a yogi in the Himalayas. And this was completely the opposite direction. Destiny, he knew, based on the gurus and his own intuition, told him that his destiny was not to go in the mountains, although that's what he really wanted to do. So it was about this new beginning and starting new things. So that was consciously, he was ambitiously starting new things, new projects, new meditation centers, and bringing new information to the world. Unconsciously, he was using his deep penetrating intuition, the Gate 57. He could tell if they were telling the truth just in their voice. And that was one of his gifts. 57 is one of the most intuitive gates of all the gates in human design. The other thing about this energy is that it's a fear gate, because all the gates of the spleen are about fear. So there could have potentially been fear about what the future was going to bring, how it was going to look for him, and was it going to be okay? Were things going to work out? So that is a potential that he had a lot of fear about the future, although he managed to push through that fear and do those things that somebody who completely, it would have been a total culture shock, completely changing, coming from India, which had this real concept of yogis and what they brought and the spiritual connection and all that type of thing, to come to a country where that just was not done and was not really heard of, and to completely start a brand new revolution or a new way of seeing meditation and all those types of things would have been quite a scary thing. But yet, for some reason, he was able to continue on. And the reason, based on his chart, would have been what he was grounded in. Again, in the unconscious side, the design side, was this shocking things happening in his life. And what could be more shocking than moving across the ocean to this brand new country? So it all sort of plays out in how his life was really the mirror. His body graph was the mirror of how his life kind of unfolded. And he did have shocking experiences throughout his life. I mean, it wasn't just, that was hugely shocking to move to a brand new country that he'd never seen. And it was in the 20s, which it was a completely different place to what it is now. I mean, this kind of thing just wasn't seen and done. And here he was showing up. And he, like I said, he did have these shocking experiences as well, where when his mother passed away, she was preparing for the brother's wedding, Yogananda's brother's wedding, and she was in a different area, and he had this dream that she was going to pass away, and he told his father, we need to go immediately see my mother, because she's going to die and I may never see her again. And father, I don't think, believed him, or he thought he was just having a bad dream, and they did end up seeing her the next day, but she had already passed. So he had these shocking experiences where he knew things and had these predictions, which would be 100% the whole 57 concept of these psychic predictions of the future. And so you could see that actually happened in his life. If you look at his moon and what drove him, and we look at his moon in the personality side or the conscious side, the moon was in the gate 29. The gate 29 is all about devotion to something, a passion for something. He was driven by a passion. He was driven for a passion for all the things in the incarnation cross. He was driven for a passion for starting things. He was driven for a passion of being ambitious. He was driven by the passion of this penetrating intuition. He was driven by a passion for bringing shocking new things to the world. And so that was another thing. And when we talk about the gate 29, we are talking about being at the right place at the right time. We are talking about an energy that you're all about this concept of any of the gates that come from the sacral to the G center are considered what's called tantric gates. And tantric gates in the human design system, it's all about this concept of taking energy and transforming that energy into a higher form. So you take a lower form energy and you transform it to a higher energy, and that's literally what he was always doing. He was taking these concepts, meditating and trying to transform the energy of other people into a higher form of that energy. The gate 29 is a deep devotion, and when you get that deep devotion or that deep passion or connection with something in your life, everything sort of falls into place and you kind of get into the flow of where you're meant to be. When we're talking about the moon, we know that it was a driving force for his life, but we're also talking about an emotional connection. So there was emotional connection to this devotion. His devotion was to his meditation, to his spiritual connection, to, who he considered God, the universe, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, he had a specific name, as anybody does when they have a spiritual devotion, but his spiritual devotion was to what he called God. And because of that, he was willing to go across the ocean, leave his whole country to bring a brand new concept to new people. The other side, the unconscious side, was this 35, and this is the experience. Now, the experience is something that when we're talking about the gate 35, it's not just jumping into any experience. This is somebody who can be good at a lot of things, but they only choose to do what feels like it's worthwhile for them. So he obviously felt like what he was doing was worthwhile. So he picked what was right for him, and he was driven to bring this thing, whatever it was, which we know it was meditation, spiritual devotion, and these new centers and new ways of thinking and being to North America. And he did that because that was obviously something that meant a lot to him. That was an experience that was important to him, that he had to experience because it was an important part of him, although it was in his unconscious part. And most of his journey began when he hadn't actually hit his 40th birthday. So this would have been an unconscious feeling on how he was driving himself into this experience without really knowing that he was doing it, but just this draw to go to a new place and a new world. So if we go to his south nodes to begin with, because that would have been first stage of life, and we know that because he is a 1-3 profile, it would have been connected to his Uranus opposition, that he would have moved on to the north node. The south node was in the gate 28. The gate 28 is a gate of struggle, or it can be the gate of what's possible, but the deepest meaning of the gate 28 is the meaning of life. So his first 40 years would have been potentially looking at, what does life mean? What's the point of us being here? And what's the reason why we're here? Why is it all happening? There's also this can-do perspective in the gate 28. When somebody says you can't do something, you say, no, I can do it. And so it's always going to push back at somebody, where if they're telling you that it can't be done, you're going to say it can be done. And when we're also talking about the gate 28, we're also talking about an energy of doing the hardest thing that you can do, just because you want to do the hardest thing. You want to play the hardest instrument. You want to start the hardest craft. You want to start the hardest sport. Whatever's difficult to do, the gate 28 gravitates towards it. And it would make a lot of sense to come across the ocean to do this brand new thing, to start breaking ground where no ground had ever been broken before. The gate 44, the other south node in the design side, was this energy of patterns, and looking at the patterns and seeing the patterns, and also using this ability to sniff out what was right for him. So that was another type of intuition that he had. He could smell what was right in his life or for him. But also there, with the gate 44, you have this ability to sell something. You make something beautiful so that you could sell it. So he was selling concepts. And I mean, I use the word sell in a very loose term. I mean, he was talking about concepts that he was very devoted to, because we have the gate 29, and he was allowing people to join him in with this concept of, this is what I believe in. And he was selling, loose term, selling the concepts so he could spread the word. If we look at the North Node in the personality side, we see that it's in the gate 27, which is a deep caring. So this is a person that even more so after he turned 40, it's not like it's not there at all, but it just becomes a bigger theme in the life after the age of 40, or the Uranus opposition. It's deep caring. It's like he didn't just do things because they were to be done. He did things because it mattered to him, because he cared. And there is a tremendous amount of wanting to take care of people, to preserve people, to just give them a lot of caring. He also had the gate 24 in the North Node in the design side, and that's unconscious. This is a rationalizing things, making a rationalization for what he did and what he said, and so that could have been related to what he was teaching to people. And also this idea that you return to where you began, so that you can figure out all the things that you did right, and how what things you could get done better. And there's a tremendous amount of investigation with this energy. Like, it's almost like you go to the scene of the crime again, and you check out all the details of how you can improve the experience the next time. And it is connected to the gate 21 if there was a full channel, and that's connected to kind of wanting to know the unknowable. Could have been this rationalizing for all the things he did, and that's not a bad thing, because it seemed like it worked out well in his life. When we go to his Mercury, he communicated his ideas, because the gate 11 is all about ideas, but there is this level of peace as well. And when you have the gate 11, you have a tremendous amount of ideas. It's like overflowing with ideas. So he would have communicated a lot of his ideas. He also has the gate 57 in Mercury in his design side. Now, we already see that the gate 57 was a theme in his life, because we see that it's featured in his unconscious sun as well as his unconscious Mercury. So we know that for him, intuition was a huge component of who he was. So he would have been able to communicate his intuitive thoughts about what was going on, and the hits he was getting on the future. He would have been able to communicate that to people. We get to his Venus. What was the feminine energy that he was connected to, or the things that he liked from that perspective? It was this ability for the greater good. So we have the gate 26 is all about the greater good. I give you something, and I win from giving it to you, and you win because you get it. So it's a win-win kind of concept. So if we're looking at this energy, what he felt he was giving, this feminine or this yin perspective of this softness of the intention or the meditations that he was giving, was in his perspective a win-win, and it was given in the concept of, and it's given in integrity. And if we look at his Venus and his design side, gate 59, and that's all about breaking barriers, and which he did. I mean, he broke barriers. And if we take it one step farther and we talk about this feminine energy, he broke barriers because a lot of women were drawn to this energy, and women decided that they were actually going to step out and support something and sort of try something different. I mean, we're talking about the 20s and 30s, when women were at home, they didn't have jobs, they didn't do anything but take care of the kids, and suddenly they had this ability to go out and learn something new, to learn how to meditate, to learn how to have a specific spiritual practice that nobody had ever seen before. So it was groundbreaking in a lot of ways, and a lot of women gravitated to this energy. So you could say that he broke barriers with the feminine energy, and they continued and joined his movement. And if we look at his Mars, this is where he would have become more mature as he grew up, as he became older. And in Mars, we have the gate 17. So the gate 17 is all about opinions, all about hypothesis. This is a hypothesis that hasn't been proven. This is the idea before the experiment has been done. So maybe he had concepts and ideas about certain things that would have transformed or evolved as he grew older, which probably, I would say for sure, was the case with him. And also in the other Mars, we have the gate 13. And we did talk about the gate 13 being the only energy that he had on his chi center. The gate 13 is a transformative energy. It is about listening to the stories of people. And by listening to the stories of people, you are in some way transforming them and sort of allowing them to evolve to that thing that they were meant to be. And that's, I think, a lot of what he did. And that was his only gate on his identity center. So that would have meant that his identity was connected deeply with this idea of transformation of people, which all goes back to this meditation concept again. So if we go down to his Saturn, because it's always nice to know what your Saturn is before you can get your Jupiter rewards. If we look at his Saturn, we see that he had this depth. So the gate 48 is all about depth, and there is this level of inadequacy. So was there potential for him to feel inadequate in what he was doing, and to have to push through that ability to say, oh, well, I don't know enough to be able to allow people to hear the information that I have. I don't know enough to be able to be a yogi or a guru or whatever I need to be. And when he felt confident in who he was and that he had had enough learning, was he able to take that out and show it to the world, which he did. So he did push through his Saturn, and he did it quite well based on his life. The other Saturn is this critical energy and this need for perfection. And so that could be another stumbling block where he wanted things to be perfect, and seeing that the world isn't perfect, there could have been some level of having to learn that the perfection that he seeks is not attainable, but in some way he found a perfection that he could hold on to, and that was his perfection in his devotion to God, the universe, and that connection that he had. What his reward was in Jupiter was again, half of the gate of the shaman, which is the gate 51. Again, 3 times in the chart, big theme. Gate 51 is all about these transformative experiences where he is changed, and the way he looks at the world is changed because of shocking events, or he himself could have transformed many people with the way he sort of initiated them, a manifester, but also initiated them with the gate 51 into this new concept of seeing something and seeing the world in a different way. So that would have been his reward, to have this deep impact and initiate people into seeing things in a different way. The gate 51 would be connected to the gate 25 if there was a complete channel. The gate 25 is the love of spirit, which meant that a lot of people would have been drawn to his energy because it's all about electromagnetics, and the matching gate coming in to connect with the gate 51, the love of spirit, innocence, and deeply spiritual energy of that particular gate. When we go down to his Uranus, we see that he has a gate 28 in the unconscious and the gate 44. So 2 repeated gates. We already talked about the gate 44, but you would look at Uranus, you would say the gate 44 in Uranus is like an unusual way of selling ideas, or unusual ideas that he was selling, unusual ways of seeing repeated patterns in his life. And if we look at it on the other side, we see it in the design side, or in the unconscious, unusual struggles. So the kind of struggles that he had, or the kind of things that he felt were his struggles in his life, may have been completely different than the struggles that the average person would have, because it would be where he was more unusual. If we look at his Neptune, the Neptune is exactly the same, because we're getting into the energies of these planets that move very little, and it's all in the 16. And he was born under a Neptune Pluto conjunction, which is a really rare, very rare thing that would happen, and it won't happen for hundreds of years again. So the fact that he was born under this conjunction was kind of mystical in itself. And what that meant was that his Neptune and his Pluto were in the gate 16. The gate 16 is all about enthusiasm. So you have 4 times that the gate 16 is featured. And this is an enthusiasm to deliver the depth of what he knows, this enthusiasm to spread the word. For him, it was all about meditation, spirituality, and in these centers that he was doing. And it was with an enthusiasm. Now, this enthusiasm, it's your finding that thing that gives you sort of that vibe to that life is a wonderful place because you found that one thing. It's something that makes your heart sing. So through his Neptune, his spirituality, he found that his spirituality made him sing. But this enthusiasm was transformative. This enthusiasm was something that pushed him to places that he probably never would have gone before, because Pluto would have shaken his foundation and his enthusiasm would have been bolstered and transformed again and again, because Pluto is all about transforming and changing. But again, this would not have been an easy transformation, because anything in Pluto, this enthusiasm, what made his heart sing, he would have had some trials and tribulations to get to that level of enthusiasm, to continue on with the devotion of what he wanted to bring into the world. If we look at the channels he only has 2 full channels. The 2 full channels he came into the world with were the 1648 and also the 2644. The 1648 is a line of talent. It means that people with this energy have a level of mastery in what they bring to the world. And I would say that his meditation, what he taught, his teachings was a level of mastery that made him who he was, made him a spiritual leader and somebody who is still, a lot of people have a devotion to him even to this day. The 4426 channel, it's all about bringing in the resources needed. So he had the talent for all the things he could do, like his meditation, or he had a talent for many things. And he also had the ability to bring the resources to support all the things he needed them to be supported. And it's a tribal energy, so he was doing it for the tribe to bring the amount of money that he needed to get these centers run. And it wasn't always easy, but it always sort of worked out. There also is this idea that you're with the 2644, this ability to sell things, or to sell an idea, to sell a concept is great, because it's actually defining the will center. And it is also the line of, there's a lot of sales energy in this particular line. So this is a good thing, because of his ability to have this energy that talked about being able to sell things or sell ideas. It was that people were able to adopt what he wanted to give them, to be able to go across the country, to be able to go to places and have these big speeches and to talk to bunches of people and stadiums full of people to teach the concepts that he was trying to teach, was definitely bolstered by this 2644 energy. Because when you have that energy, it already makes you somebody who people want to listen to, and it comes with a tremendous amount of integrity. Or the other aspect is selling things that benefit you but don't benefit others, and I don't think that was the case for him. I mean, I think there was a tremendous amount of integrity that came through with this energy as well. So those were the 2 channels that were defined in his whole chart, and definitely be seen in the trajectory of his life. And I'm not going to go through all the lines of the gates, because I already talked quite a bit and I'm starting to lose my voice, and I think it's getting to be that time when I'm going to close up the video. But if we just look at the particular gates, so if we look at the 53 in his conscious earth, we see that 53 is in the gate 1. So we think about investigating, starting new things. If we look at the gate 54, we can see the 54 in the line 1, investigating ambition. How does my ambition look, and how can I take it out into the world, and sort of finding out the information and investigating what his ambition looked like and how it sort of factored in his life. The gate 57 is in the line 3, so experimenting with his intuition, experimenting with what he could see in the future, experimenting with his penetrating intuition. The gate 51 in the line 3 is experimenting with initiating people or shocking people into the concepts that he wanted to bring to the table, and it's all about experimenting with it. If we look at the gate 16, we see that the gate 16 is in the line 3, 4, 5, and 6. So in that case, we would have the enthusiasm where he was experimenting with his enthusiasm, experimenting with what made his heart sing. Then when he found that the information that he learned from what made his heart sing. Then he built a foundation with his enthusiasm. He built a foundation with what exactly made everything light up in his life. Then he went on to universalize that energy, or to share that energy share the energy of his enthusiasm with the world. And then after he was 50, he brought the enthusiasm into a role model concept, where by being himself, he was just showing the world what enthusiasm looked like, and also showing the world what it feels like to chase that thing that makes your heart sing, and to completely adopt it in your life. So that's how the lines would work. And if we look at where he had talent for critical thought, because he had the 18 in the line 2. He had talent for initiating people or shocking people into getting closer to God. He had talent for finding out what opinions were important and what were not as important, as well as understanding what hypotheses were worthwhile and which ones weren't. He also had talent with his devotion and what drove him, and also the concept of transforming energy from a lower form to a higher form. So those were all the talents that he had coming into the world. So you could use the lines to just give one more dimension to the whole body graph. And if you use all the concepts, now, of course, I've read a few charts, so I'm quite familiar with reading human design charts. So it's easy for me to get into the details. But if you wanted to just use a keyword and connect it with the planetary energy, or just use a keyword for the gates to start out with, to get the energy of what that gate means, how it looks, and check it out in your whole own life and see how you express that gate. And if you know somebody else who has the same gate as you, just watching them and how they express the gate, because once you get a feel for the energy of your own gates, it's easier to see it in other people. So when you get a real good concept of your body graph, then it's easier to go out and start looking at other people's body graphs and connecting with that. But if there's anything to say about the whole thing about learning how to read your own chart, it's about taking your time, giving yourself a break, understanding that this information can take some time to get into your system, to integrate, and being patient that eventually it will all come together. And if it means that you read different people's charts, I find that reading celebrity charts it's usually pretty good, because we have so much information about celebrities, and you can connect the information from the body graph a lot of times with some of the expression or the energy that you see in the world. So a lot of people with a 5-1 profile are actors. So if you look at the amount of actors who have a 5-1 profile, you'll see that there's a fair few of them. So just those little tiny things that you can use, and practice it as much as you can, and the more you do, the better you'll get. So I hope that this series and this course has been helpful to you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I will either answer them in the comment section, or I'll make a comment that I will answer them in an upcoming video. And the more I can help, the better, because the reason why I did this course and the reason why I have it free on YouTube is because I want more and more people to know about their human design, because I know it's so valuable, and it can save a lot of grief for not only you, but in your relationships, other people's relationships. If you help them with their body graphs, you help them to learn human design, and the benefit is so immense that I don't think there's any reason why we need to keep this secret anymore. So let's open the jar of secrets and sprinkle them around the world, and let human design spread, and let people benefit from the energy of knowing more about who they are. Because as I always say, the more we know about ourselves, the easier life gets. So thank you so much for being here, and I will be back another time with more information on human design, more human design videos, and thank you again for participating. Without you, there would not be this channel. So thank you again.